the lecture. I will ask you several questions, okay? As you know, the topic now is from Luria's theory to clinical practice. And I would like to show the online workstation Barcelona. This is a workstation for doing a neuropsychological assessment. The introduction has several parts. The first part is concerning general concepts on neuropsychological assessment. You know, the objective of neuropsychology is to study the relationship between the brain and the neurological status of the patient, the cognitive function, the emotional states, and the social behavior. This is two parts of our interest. But this relationship, we study it in relation with lesions in the brain. And the lesions, we have different types. And the different types of lesion generate several types of clinical manifestations. If we accept, because it is needed, an integrated assessment of a patient, then we need all the information, all the aspects that we are able to find. We need a clinical history, and if it is a medical diagnosis, this is very important. We need the antecedents, family, personal. We need the medical and neurological general information about the patient, the clinical general and the clinical neurological exam. We need the medical test, mainly neuroimaging. And we will do a neuropsychological examination. This is essential for the activity of a neuropsychologist. But not only this, we need the observed and report behavior by the families or by the relatives. Thanks to all this information, we must do an interpretation process. This is the difficulty for a neuropsychologist, how to interpret and how to express the results in a good clinical report. In fact, in an integrated assessment implies four main areas, as I explained it: the history, the behavioral presentation, the symptoms, the test results of neuropsychological and psychological assessment. What about the etiology? What are the conditions, the diseases that are behind the problems of the patient? And this is crucial. What we know about functional neuroanatomy. And this aspect will be crucial, or model of functions in the brain. For an integrated assessment, you must to evaluate every domain to observe if there is internal consistency in each of these four domains, and then the logical of the relationship between all the domains. In fact, we consider multiple sources of data, and we verify each source of data against each other for a consistency. And finally, we integrate all the information in a cogent, in other words, in a convincing description of the individual patient. These sentences from Cimino are very important. The extent to which interpretation of data can progress in a systematic, organized, and veridical fashion is dependent of an overarching global conceptual model of the brain-behavior relationships. This is crucial. And this scheme is also important because if you have a model, you have a theory, you will use tools that you will obtain different measures using your neuropsychological test, and then you will classify and you will make a diagnostic depending of your measures that are included in your tools, obviously. Here there is an interpretation, and here also an interpretation. Example, in case of aphasia syndromes. If you follow the theories of Alexander Romanovich Luria, you will consider this model, the classical or the 5 blocks, and you will analyze the symptoms considering these relationships. If you use the Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Examination, there is not a clear biological basis, but there is also a model with a series of tests, and you will obtain a profile that gives you an orientation for the diagnosis. If you follow a cognitive model using boxes and arrows that describe the functional architecture, then you will try to use tests to study each of the components and also the relationships between the components. But obviously, all depends of your problem in neuropsychological assessment. It is not the same to assess a patient in an office with the purpose of make a diagnosis that to assess a patient here during an operation, during the exeresis of a tumor. The needs here, the patient is awake, and here are 2 of my students assessing the patient during the exeresis, the operation of the tumor. These needs are absolutely different. And here we also need a method. Another important point. What kind of test we are using? What task is included in the test? What is the task characteristics? In fact, we have 2 types of tests, the pathognomonic test or Lurianistic, and the psychometric test or neuropsychometric. I mean, in Luria's approach, the tests are mainly pathognomonic. I mean, when a subject do not pass correctly the test, that means there is a problem. For example, if I give as test the repetition of words, all normal people will repeat correctly words. Repeat table, repeat bottle, repeat computer. This is a Lurianistic test because we expect the maximum. Are dichotomic, correct? Not correct. It's said that in Russian neuropsychology is not psychometrics. This is not true. In Russian neuropsychology, if, as Luria, use this kind of test, psychometrics is not important because the result is dichotomic. Okay? But the neuropsychometric tests show a Gaussian or a Gaussian distribution. there is a mean and standard deviation. This is the point. This is crucial for the analysis of our patients. When we have a lesion in the brain, we observe neurological problems like paresis, dysarthria, sensory loss, optic ataxia, oculomotor disorders, visual fields problems. We have basic pathognomonic type tests like orientation. Mainly language comprehension is dichotomic. Basic naming is dichotomic. All people will know what's a dog, a cat, a bottle. This is dichotomic. But if this test of naming we use, in this case, the Boston naming test, in which there are frequent and not frequent words, then this very easy task is converted in a psychometric task. This is central to understand the results of neuropsychological assessment and how to combine the psychometric and non-psychometric assessments. Okay? When we have psychometric tests, normally we have the influence of age, education, and sometimes sex. Okay? For example, here, if we have this task, this is a constructional praxis, this is very simple, and this is complex. The task is a copy, but this is very easy, and this is practically dichotomic. To do or not to do correctly. That's correct? Yes? You think? I am telling you the truth? As ever, depends of what? Just a moment. A comment, and then we will discuss again. If a task is very simplistic and the subject knows how to do it, then this task is from sensory aspects, the copy, vision, that implies the temporal inferior cortex, the pathway of what, because it recognizes this is a circle, this is a square, this is a triangle, and the parietal, the dorsal pathway, because this is placed in this situation where, and there is a connection with the premotor cortex in which there is the store of the motor pattern how to do this task. Okay? Then this is practically is a sensory motor activity. Association, what, where, how, with the motor activities. Obviously, you need the oculomotor control. The eyes movement are very important, and it will participate, but are not essential, because you can close your eyes and do correctly a circle. Okay? Well, if the task is that, to copy this figure, then you need more functional components. And then it's not possible to go from the sensory to motor, because you need the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to organize the task, how to make the plan. But when a person analyzes this, can say, oh, there is a circle, oh, there is a rectangle, oh, there is a square, there is a triangle. That implies recognition, that implies ventral pathway, and the relationship between the components of the figure are related with the superior pathway, the dorsal pathway, where is placed. Okay? This is essential. I don't know why it does not appear here. Just a minute. Oh. Please, what do you think about this? What kind of diagnosis is possible to do here? These are several patients, several subjects. This is a parietal lesion. Is this Alzheimer's disease advanced? What's this? The answer. Schooling. These are people from 21 to 23 years old without schooling. There is no lesion in the brain. You know then what this means. Schooling is crucial. This was my first paper I published in this year, several years ago. Some examples of illiterate subjects, all were men. It's dramatic. Then at a snatchet, that signifies that apparently simplistic task, if there is not good learning, this is very complex. Subjects are trying to resolve the problem, because this is a problem, using the frontal lobe. They have not sensoriomotor circuits. What?
Before you showed the slide with psychometric tests and autonomic, and there the autonomous.
That means here you need psychometry.
Yeah, but why would you ever use the autonomic? I mean, it's less specific, right?
It's different because it works different components of the brain. When a task is very simplistic and you control it, this is sensoriomotor ever. In this case, when it is sensoriomotor, you have a dichotomy. This, in theory, may be sensoriomotor, but in fact, in these cases, as the subject do not know the result, has not the circuit to do it, then it is very complex. Well, next step. We explain you the neuronorma battery. Because the neuronorma battery is a psychometric battery, practically in all the aspects. I say when I stay in my hospital that the neuronorma battery is the recognized internationally battery for a neuropsychological assessment. The neuronorma battery was published as a monography in Archive of Clinical Neuropsychology. 7 papers. I am the first author of these 7 papers. We studied 356 participants, normals, in 9 hospitals in Spain. The first paper shows the methodology, and the other papers, the different tests. The tests included here, you will see, are the tests that are present in main journals. Is the, I repeat, an international complex battery. Digit span, visual span, Corsi test, trail making test, symbol digit modalities test, Benton's judgment of line orientation, the Bosch battery, visual object and perception battery, the very known Boston naming test, the comprehension using the token test, Busquets test, the free and acute selective reminding test. If you want, I can give you all these papers, because I have the PDF, are free. The Ray-Osterried complex figure, verbal fluences, animals, words beginning with P, the Strop test, and the Tower of London test. But Drexel University system of the Tower of London. Obviously, this is in Russian, psychometria. This is the first paper, methods and sample characteristics. I will not explain all this. You will read it if you want. After these papers, we study a group of young subjects, because here is from 50 years and beyond. And we have currently a total sample of 535 subjects. If we place in order all these tests, and you remember the characteristics of each test, the repetition of digits, the block Corsi, that's a similar but individual aspect. This is the trail making test. This is the Boston naming test. This is the token test to follow orders, to understand, touch a big circle or red big circle, etc. This is the judgment of line orientation. This is the Ray test. This is the list of words to be remembered in the free and acute selective reminding test, and different tasks related with this. This is the memory of the initial copy of the figure. Here we have the fluencies, the Stroop, the Tower of London, and the visual objects. If we have here a visual test, the judgment of line orientation, but why the WASP is here, the object decision and the progressive silhouettes and position discrimination, what is placed in the last place? Because this test is not exactly psychometric, it's more dichotomic. This is the reason to place it at the end of the list. As we have studied all the tests in the same group of normal subjects, we have a conorm battery. That means all the tests are normalized in the same group. And then we can compare the results because all the methods we were doing were the same. And this allows us to compare and to have here a profile. This is the group of tests, as I was commenting: attention, visomotor, executive language, visual and constructional memory, executive, visual and spatial recognition. We have a mean, because we have a Gaussian distribution, and we can determine what is normal and what is normal, because the middle of the Gaussian distribution is number 10 here. Okay? Thanks to this, we have a list of all the things we assess using this test and to try to observe dissociations. This is crucial in neuropsychology. For example, here I have the attention and working memory test, but divided in visual and visuospatial. Here I have the attention and visuomotor task that are evaluated using the trail-making test and the symbol-digit modalities test. Then we studied the lexicon using the Boston naming test. But the lexicon has a frequency factor. And we also, when use this test, we can assess visual recognition. We can assess paragnosia, optic agnosia, or optic aphasia. Then here we have the oral verbal comprehension, and with using the token test, but not only this, because if we give a long order, then we include working memory. In several cases, there is a problem in the token test, not for problems of language, but due to working memory. This is the important fact to analyze. This is a Lurianistic approach. Not only the score of the test, but also the semiology, the qualitative aspects of the results. This is essential. If you don't use the qualitative aspects in the assessment, this is not neuropsychology. This is strictly psychometry. Has no interest. You see here that if we study the lexicon using the Boston naming test, and then here we ask names of animals, there is obvious a relationship between these tasks concerning the lexicon. If we ask names of animals here, this is semantics and lexicon. But if we ask only words that begin with the letter P, this is lexicon, not necessarily semantics. This is the so-called ipsative analysis in neuropsychology. We compare. We compare the results in trail-making test A with trail-making test B. This is ipsative. If the simplistic, the easy part of the trail-making test is not correctly done, then has no sense to try to analyze if there is an executive problem because the patient fails in part B. Some people only uses trail-making test part B. This is in part ridiculous because we need to compare part A with part B, like we do in the Stroop test. This is psychometry, but also the qualitative analysis is this is in Catalan. I mean neuropsychological Lurianistic evaluation. Well, this is very long to explain. You understand the problem. The same case in the constructional praxis included in the Ray-Osteriet complex figure, but it's also an executive component included in this task. Okay? Well, the Neuronorma project, in fact, is a project similar to a project previously done in the Mayo Clinic in the United States. It was published in 1992. When I said this monography published in the Clinical Neuropsychology, I said to me, I want this, we need this. And this is the reason we have the Neuronorma project in Spain. In part, is a copy of a project done in the United States in the Mayo Clinic. Mayo Older American Normative Studies. This is essential. But the methodology is just the same that in the other project. The results are in scale scores. It means there is a scale from 2 to 18, and each of these numbers represents a percentile range. 10, it represents from 41 to 59 percentile range. This allows to see the Gaussian distribution and to consider that a scale score of 6 corresponds to percentiles 6 to 10. And here starts the psychometric problem. These scale scores correspond to different parts of the distribution. Okay? In the original published papers, we have done an initial study of the subjects, dividing subjects by age, and then you compare your patient with its corresponding group of age. Only age. Then you avoid the problem of age because you compare your subjects with each corresponding group of age. In a second part of the psychometric study, we correct the results of age considering education. In the original papers in the United States, they give a complex formula to calculate. We decided to create this table. It's easier to look the results in a table than to calculate a complex formula. But why not to create all this online, automatic? If we decided to do this in a workstation. But originally, these are the classic approach, two-step approach, considering age and then correcting age following the information about schooling. Okay? The neuronorma battery was also validated by neuroimaging. We studied Alzheimer's disease patients and mild cognitive impairment subjects. This is the profile of the mild cognitive impairment subject. This is the profile of the Alzheimer's disease. And we calculated the volumetry of the hippocampus. We calculated the global volume of the cortex and the subcortical structures, and we have all the correlations between psychometry and structure. I mean, this is not only a validated psychometric approach, but also structurally validated. Let's comment about the other approach that is in the workstation, the Barcelona test. The Barcelona test was originally my doctoral dissertation. 2 years ago, no. Some years ago, no. A lot of years ago. No Galiet Nasat. Well, currently is in Spanish. We are translating now. Part of the website is in English, and 2 of my students are in England working for the Barcelona test in English. And also it's possible to translate to other language because the system is very clear, it's very easy. We're also translating it in automatically in Russian. Like we have a conventional form, the typical pencil and paper test. Now we have a conventional and electronic forms. The test has been validated with norms from the NeuroNorma project, and we use artificial neuronal networks to use this technology to validate the test. Well, I will not explain the details. I will show the list of tests included. And you think about Luria. This is more Lurianistic. Because in the other, in NeuroNorma, I said the international recognized battery, yes. But in this kind of batteries, there is not a task of orientation or repetition. Then all this is in the Barcelona test. We start with a conversation, and we score if there is aphasia, the severity, a fluency score, fluent, not non-fluent, and the informational content of the subject in the verbal production. Then we study prosody. Prosody is very important, the rhythm and the melody of language. You will please think about, if you read this list, what pathological possibilities we have for study. Here, prosody. The pathological aspect, aprosodias, and the classification of aprosodias. Okay? Here, aphasia, types of aphasia concerning verbal expression. Then orientation, but orientation in person, in place, in time. What are the aspects in pathology, disorientation. But this orientation is homogeneous? No. You may observe, frequently you observe disorientation in time only. Think about all these possibilities. This is also to make neuropsychology, the interpretation of qualitative aspects of the answer of the patient. Digit repetition, this is is the same task that in the neuronorma battery. It's a classical test. Automatic sequences, forward and backward, to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is automatic. This is included in the Boston naming test. In the Boston aphasia diagnostic examination. More examples here. The days of the week. More examples here. The month of the year. Okay? But not only forward, also backward. The automatic versus more executive task. And to compare, to make an ipsative approach. Oral praxis, this is important. In generally, no. But in cases of motor aphasia, oral praxis is crucial. Then you think here the possibilities of oral, verbal apraxia. Repetition. But repetition, like Luria did, we must study the repetition of syllables, pairs of syllables, pseudo-words, minimal pairs of words, and sentences. Are different tasks. And we can observe dissociations. And dissociations will be important for diagnosis. Okay? Then, what? A lot of things is possible to study here. Language and speech disorders, paraphasia types. It's not the same phonologic paraphasia that a semantic paraphasia. The dichotomy fluent, non-fluent aphasias. Also here, the dysarthria types related in general problems of language. Disorientation, attention problems, working memory impairments, automatic speech impairment, mental control related with basal ganglia functions, another important aspect. Oral apraxia, in cases of Broca's aphasia, for example. Repetition. We have two different situations. Normal repetition, impairment of repetition. If we have an impairment of repetition, this is called dysechophemia. And the different kinds of dysechophemia are related with different types of aphasia. And you can observe phonological aphasia with problems in repetition of nonsense words. Deep aphasia, in cases when you observe semantic paraphasia. This is the deep aphasia. A general problem in repetition. This is conduction aphasia. Also, you can observe problems in repetition in several aspects, very specific, when are problems of attention or when you give short sentences and are correctly repeated, but you give long sentences and you observe problems, maybe a problem in working memory. in several cases, you will observe normal repetition, but the subject has aphasia. This is the group of transcortical aphasias. Then you can see that this list, the first part of the first module of the Barcelona test, the large possibilities to observe semiology and make a correct neuropsychological diagnosis. But let's follow. Here, naming. Objects, actions, body parts. The easier task, the most easy task is naming body parts. This is explained by a lot of authors. Naming, responsive and closure naming. For example, what is the color of milk? White. What is the color of blood? Okay? Here, closure naming is to close a sentence giving a name. When it rains, we use an umbrella. Когда идет дождь, мы употребляем зонт. Хорошо по-русски? Или зонтик? Нет? Что мы... Как вы говорите по-русски? Well, verbal fluencies. Animals, words beginning by P, and also verbs, actions. This is an interesting new task because actions depend on more frontal areas of the brain. And this helps to make analysis of dissociations. And finally here you have verbal comprehension of words, body parts, commands, and sentences. Think about all the possibilities we have here. This comes from the first part we were commenting. And here we have the study of lexicon, the anomias. It's a visual-verbal task because I show the object. We can observe paraphasias, and the types of paraphasia will be very important. The anomia normally is characteristic of different aphasia types. When I show an object visually, may be present a visual agnosia, and then we will observe errors, visual errors of paragnosias, or a very specific naming defect, who's called optic aphasia. There is an anomia only in the visual domain. I published a case in the Journal of Neurolinguistics some years ago also. Here, you may observe an anomia, but this is a verbal task because the stimulus is not visual. The stimulus is verbal. Okay? Here, you will study lexical semantic deficits, executive function, and working memory. And it's possible to observe dissociations, obviously. For example, at the beginning of Alzheimer's disease, the problem is here, in animals. The score in cases of words beginning with P is correct at the beginning of Alzheimer's disease. Because as you know, in Alzheimer's disease, we have a disruption of the semantic network. And then it's very difficult to give words in a semantic field. Here, verbal comprehension, aphasia types, in which comprehension is affected. Oral comprehension deficits, and a dichotomy, lexical versus supralexical deficits. When the problem is around the words, the patient do not understand words, or understand words but not sentences. Luria had a very clear example. The patient is able to understand father, brother correctly. Отец, брат. Father, brother. But in Luria's example, patient is not able to understand отец брата, брат отца, the father of the brother and the brother of the father. Отец брата, брат отца. This is a lexical versus in front of a supralexical deficit. In aphasia, this is very important. Now, Module 2, written language. Yes.
Can you give us an example of the verbal task for assessment?
Verbal tasks, when patients don't understand the verbal part of the test. What is the color of, for example, what is the color of blood? If don't understand what is the color, then will not give the answer. This is very typical in cases of dissociation when you have a visual problem. In optic aphasia, subject does correctly well, absolutely well, the verbal task. Here. Reading letters, numbers, pseudo words, words and a text. Reading comprehension, relationship between a word and an image, comprehension of letters, words, pseudo words, commands and sentences. Here we study the graphomotor skills, the mechanics of writing. Here the dictation tasks, letters, numbers, pseudo words, words, and here written picture naming and narrative writing. Think about the possibilities. Alexias, agraphia, pure alexia, pure agraphia, alexia with agraphia, aphasic alexia, aphasic agraphia. What? Here. Alexias here, agraphia here, alexia with agraphia when there is a combination between problems in both areas. When the problem is peripheric, you have the peripheral alexia. When you have problems here in graphomotor skills, you are in front of peripheral agraphia. And you will observe paralexias. And depending on the types of paralexia, you will observe a phonological alexia, a deep alexia, a surface alexia, or a semantic alexia. All depends also of the system of writing. If you write in Japanese, they use kanjis and kanas, and they use katakana and hiragana, then you will observe clear dissociation between these systems of writing. In the cases of languages that are very transparent, like Spanish or Russian, the semiology, the symptoms will be very different in front of cases of English. The formal aspect of English is alphabetic, but it behaves in several aspects like Chinese, because you must extract the sounds with not using norms, like when you read Shakespeare. Okay? Apparently, this is a very is alphabetic, obviously, but you must use global reading. Here you can observe neglect, alexia with agraphia. Here you can observe paragraphia types, the different types of agraphias. And you can observe pure agraphia when all is correct, language is correct, but only there is a problem in reading, or agraphia in the context of aphasia. Motor and praxic task, again. What must to examine? Symbolic gesture, commands and imitation, object use, sequential object use, pseudo-gesture imitation, unilateral and bilateral, alternating sequences, this is typical from Luria, and constructional praxis, following commands or copy. Okay? What about here? Again, a lot of things. Idiomotor apraxia with imitation deficits in right, left, or bilateral extremities, depending if you have a problem in the corpus callosum. Ideational apraxia. We are in the field of these executive problems. You can compare the results when you give orders and you ask to imitate. In several cases, it's possible to observe an imitation apraxia. This is the conduction apraxia, limb kinetic apraxia, and the constructional apraxia. Okay. What about perception and gnosis? Visuographic attention, the recognition of non-prototypical perspectives, I mean, the recognition this, as you can see, in a prototypical situation, or recognition this in a not prototypical situation. When the object is presented in a non-prototypical situation, it's necessary to mentally rotate the stimulus, and this depends on the right posterior areas of the brain. This is very important. Excuse me?
If you're like rotating it, then it's also related to its
No,
visual
the subject sees a picture. I don't rotate it in front.
like patient rotating it from his or her mind.
No, no,
Oh,
he cannot.
you're doing it.
I give a picture in which there is the drawing of the bottle in this placement.
So in the mind, patient should rotate it.
Mentally.
It's also, isn't it also related to visual spatial perception?
I don't hear you.
Visual spatial
This is a special task. This is, if you know the model of MAR, in the MAR model, there is the primary sketch, the view of the observer, and the global representation of the element. If you see this in this position, you mentally can rotate and to represent all the object. Here we have the overlapping figures. This is a test of Koppel-Reuter, classical test. All these tasks concern color processing, tactile recognition, graphesthesia, morphognosia, object recognition, finger recognition, right-left orientation, and auditory recognition. What about the pathological part of all this? The possibilities of neglect in cases of right parietal, mainly parietal lesions, the object recognition problems, if the problem is specific in the rotated presentation, you will have the so-called pre-semantic recognition problem. Then you have here the object discrimination deficits, and here all the possibilities of colors: achromatopsia, color anomia, color aphasia, color association defects, and color agnosia. Here you have the agraphesthesia, amorphognosia, tactile agnosia, right, left, or bilateral. Here you have the finger agnosia, the right, left disorientation. And if it is combined with agraphia and acalculia, you will observe a Gershman syndrome. Concerning memory, you have here a story recall memory from Luria, word learning tasks, like in Luria, visual memory, immediate recognition, and the memory of the complex figure of the Barcelona test. Here you will observe dissociations, verbal memory defects, visual learning problems, and visual memory deficits. That's clear. When we have a patient with a destruction of right hippocampus, normally there is a clear decrease of memory results here. And when the destruction is in the left hemisphere, the patient have verbal memory problems. And last but not the least, the last module, abstract executive. Information, abstraction, similarities, proverbs and situations, calculation, arithmetic problems, digit symbol substitution, and block design. You will observe long-term memory. This is mainly the cultural knowledge. This is the reason why this has a very good correlation with the years of schooling. Clear? Abstraction, acalculia, and arithmetia, executive control problems, and abstract visual-constructional and planification tasks. Let's go to the practice then. Remember all these things and the functional model of 5 units. And remember, paper and paper and paper. This is the past. and we need a word here, is stop. Stop. We have technological new possibilities, and computer and internet technology allow implementing new assessment paradigms. I will include all I have commented and more in a system of cloud computing. This is Paruski, the addition. Neuropsychological assessment, cloud computing. I will try to describe a neuropsychological assessment workstation, the development, the structure, the functionalities, and the context. Is the result of this addition is a workstation. But remember that neuropsychology is more than cognition, because we need also study neuropsychiatric symptoms. In classical approaches, neuropsychiatry is not present, but neuropsychiatry is crucial. Well, we decide to develop a web. There is a series of complex technical aspects I don't know, because I have a team. We pay a team to create the web. They are using these kind of programs, the Joomla content management, the browser, the Mozilla Firefox, but it works with other browsers. And we have a specific server for this project, because it's by law important to have a specific server for confidentiality. Then, legal use issues. In this case, we must to follow the European Union legislation. And we are following these crucial norms. And to respect the copyright. Well, we decided to create a web with the following structure: patients, visits, and profiles. Patients is the management and registration area. Visits is the medical and neurological part of neuropsychology. And this, the profile, because finally we will create a graphical profile of the results of the test. This is the assessment area. And obviously we included variables using text fields, boxes with to write freely, and a series of variables that were codified with radio buttons, drop-down list, check boxes, etc. And concerning language, we started with our language, Catalan, and the Spanish. In fact, the system is programmed in Spanish. We have practically all in English, and other languages can be developed. Then we decided to facilitate our job. And we decided to include chronometers, timers, audio recorders, automatic score adjustments, automatic scoring, file upload systems, file review, profile generators, report generators, search systems, and so on. Because if you think about several possibilities, it's possible to create the concerning facility. If you include a video camera, we are using the action system from this company, Mirilis, in Germany. You will register the patient. Well, the working station in Russian Рабочая станция is possible to create it in different languages. We created, you can see here is the Catalan flag, the Spanish flag, the Catalan flag, the German, the British, the French, the Portuguese, and the Russian. These are the different parts of the web, and you have here the 10% of translation. And you will see in a moment. Here there is the Russian flag. In a page that is controlled by the administrators, appears here the list of programming in Spanish, the English translation. Here there is a button, you act on the button and you will get the Russian translation or the Portuguese translation or the German translation. But the system makes errors, obviously. For example.
This is the artificial intelligence that you're...
No. This is another thing. This is the Google Translator. Yeah, yes.
I was curious about that program that you're using because you said your students translating it into English and they're using some kind of artificial intelligence.
Yes, the artificial networks is only for to study the results of a group of patients, and automatically the neuronal artificial network classifies the subjects, following the pattern of supervised learning, like the cerebellum, it classifies. Yes? I don't hear you. No, the idea of the artificial networks, you know, one of my collaborators is an engineer and knows perfectly this technology. And there are some papers in neuropsychology that give the results of a series of subjects, 200 subjects, for example, and to teach the network how to classify. The network knows how to classify because it's the task of the neuronal artificial networks. We train the network. And yes. This is the basis of the artificial intelligence, one of the components. When you use Google, one day you ask for a flight to New York, and several days later appears an advertising you to go to New York. In fact, they use artificial networks.
Yeah, but there is still an interface. I'm not really good at this, like that engineering stuff, but there is still an interface, and when you like add some information in it, it's just creating some networks, and it's like developing itself. But at the beginning, still you have a main source, like.
In this case, our objective or goal is only to use the neuronal artificial network to help the classification, to help the clinician. In this aspect, we have teach the artificial network using 100 subjects, for example, and then when we give a new subject, the network tries to classify, considering his previous information, in a category, only this. I don't hear you, I don't understand you.
Network is always under the train or no, it's acting like test and train. Because artificial networks has three layers. An input, the hidden layer, which is you talk to everything. Then, So network is if the network is always be under the train, just receive the orders from the network. I'm the network, I'm the programmer. So I just said that it's okay, just find these specific things for me, then send it to the hidden layer, calculate it, then give me the output. But here's another bias line, like a backdoor. I'm going to say that it's okay. Do that for me. You think that this one is classified, for example, for dyslexia or not? Then the network says, no, it's not. Okay, bias it back to the input to search for another one. So network is always on test and
No. More simplistic, not so complex. We are starting. There is not a lot of papers in this field in neuropsychology. There are a few papers. Our objective was initially a doctoral dissertation of my colleague as engineer. This was his task. And then we have implemented the network in the workstation. And when you study specifically only cases of mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease, there is a button, you give the results, and then the implemented network in the system will give you the probability of being normal, MCI, or Alzheimer's disease. Only this. Now we are studying Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, vascular dementia, to help with these technologies. But in fact, the gold criterium, the gold standard, is the clinician, is the interpretation of the results. And we try to be helped using these technologies. Okay? As I was commenting, we have the automatic translation, but the system makes errors. For example, in English is correct sex. In Russian, they use the word pol, niet sex. Then the system translates sex, and you must change in Russian pol. Okay? This is the task to do in case we have done when we translate into Catalan or into French or in other languages. Yes, because one of my students is from the Azores, in Joao, and he started to translate in Portuguese. Well, we decided, as I was commenting then, the structure of management will be formed by a register, a view of the clinical course, a system to generate reports, a warning concerning pending tasks, a list of internal confidential data which will not appear in clinical reports, how to see and to see scanned documents, and to hear save audio files. We decided to create this area for visits case history, medical antecedents, developmental history, the use of drug, medical exam, neurological exam, medical tests, neuroimaging, diagnosis, and treatments. In each of these modules may be divided in submodules. All the information you need in a normal assessment of a patient, an integral approach. We decided this is the area of neuropsychologists. They start with the preliminary data, the situation of the interview and testing conditions, the alertness and the possibility of delirium, an area for neuropsychiatric functional and deterioration staging, and a modular cognitive approach with the detection of dementia, the Barcelona test, the neuronorma battery. And the Barcelona test is composed of modules, as I have shown to you. But we can select tests from here and to create short versions. The alpha, the beta, the abbreviated version, a version for aphasia, or a complement for the neuronorma battery. This is automatic. And also a series, a version for forensic and ecological assessment of the subjects. Well, the results is this. You have in the papers this picture. And this is the layout of the management, as you can see in the screen of your computer. Registration, clinical course, reports, etc. This is a video. You can see here to save the patient, to cancel, to go to profiles, to close a patient. You have here the general data and the confidential data to introduce. Here is the clinical course, if all your notes appear here. You can navigate to the profile or the visit. This is the list of created reports. This is the space to write pending tasks. Here is the space for confidential information. Here you can see the neuroimaging or your information you have placed in the system. This for the students is excellent. You can observe the results of a patient. You don't need envelopes and papers and papers and papers. And here, if there is audio recorders, you will observe the audio recorders. This is the area for general and personal data. The registration with general data concerning here personal data, the referral center, the name of the referral doctor, the initials, the sex, birth date, the languages with menus. And the system works using pop-ups. Here is a pop-up for the Edinburgh Handedness Inventory. You have the test here, the list of items, here the possibility of the scores, the automatical result of the the score. And here you have calculate and save. If you do this here, the window is closed and the result appears here. This is the layout of the visit area. These are the functionalities included in the system. The case report, reason for consultation, the case history, the clinical history confidential information, the medical antecedents, family background, Alzheimer's disease, Down disease, socio-familiar status, personal habits. Here it's possible to calculate the grams of alcohol consumed automatically. This is great for Spain. For example, here is not vodka, it appears cognac. It's typical, but it's practically equivalent. You write the number of units, the drinks of the day, and you will get the number of grams of alcohol consumed in a day. You have the ischemia score, and here by areas, cardiovascular problems, metabolic problems, digestive problems, psychiatric and abuse problems, neurological, respiratory, hematological, immunological, ophthalmological, etc., etc. All the information is here. The profile area layout shows the start and the test in several buttons. You will have here the DEM detect summary profile, the Barcelona test that I was showing you, and here the Neuronorma battery. Well, let's finish 5 minutes. You will have me to make a diagnosis. Here. Attention. Non-fluent aphasia, spare repetition, minimal problems in repetition of pairs of syllables, and minimal problems in repetition of pseudo words. Non-fluent repetition is spare, but not in sentences. There is anomia and good comprehension of a lexical level. Problems in supralexical levels in sentences. What's this? Don speaks but repeats. And comprehension is acceptable. Transcortical motor aphasia, because in Broca aphasia there is not repetition. With a form of transcorticalism in which lexical comprehension is good, but supralexical comprehension is not good. What this? It's fluent, good repetition, a minimal problem in minimal pairs, minimal problems in sentences. Here's anomia. in two directions, two-way anomia. Don't know the word and don't understand the word when we offer several words. Two-way anomia. With a problem in comprehension. What's this? Transcortical sensory aphasia with two-way anomia. Oh, practically all is correct, but repetition shows a severe impairment. What's this? This echophemia is not perfectly fluent, but rhythm and melody prosody is correct. Automatic sequences are correct. This is not significant problem in oral praxis, but it's dramatic. Conduction aphasia. This all is perfect. Minimal problems in severity because some problems in with the presence of minimal anomia, but an isolated anomia. Only a problem in body parts, because I commented that it's very easy to name body parts. What's this? Pure anomic aphasia. This. Normal language, perfect. But has a problem in reading. Well, the diagnosis is written. But there is not agraphia. But in this case, it is very typical that letter reading is spared. This is a pure alexia. Then we have 4 forms: occipitosplenial with or not hemianopsia, and subangular with or not hemianopsia. Oh, curious. Sioharasho? Yes, I finish. 1 minute. This the last. What's this? Problems in pseudo words. This is a phonological aphasia. And this is, I will show the last slide. Well, I think we must to change our approach, to forget the paper, to use new technologies. This is very useful for clinical practice. These are my students, all work with a computer in the classroom using these materials. And finally, thank you very much. This is my city from the mountain, and this is the Mediterranean, or sea, from Greece and beyond. And thank you very much for your attention.
We are starting, so please prepare. Okay. You remember that I told you yesterday that there were two topics of my research and work: laterality and bilingualism. And I worked on bilingual aphasia, Lurian approach to bilingual aphasia, and at some point, people started to ask me about how to use the knowledge about the brain to learn language, to learn a new language, a foreign language, more efficiently. At that time, I was still in Russia, working with at the Rostov University, and people started to learn very intensively English, because things changed and the Iron Curtain was demolished, and people were preparing for international cooperation. And they started to ask me some practical questions, and I started some cooperation with teachers of languages. And then came my own challenge for learning a new language, because I immigrated to Israel, and the very great challenge was to learn Hebrew at the not so young age. So I did it very intensively, but at that time, people who were learning Hebrew together with me, in Hebrew we call them, we call the school for languages Ulpan. So my colleagues from Ulpanim started to ask me very strange questions. For example, a young lady asked me, I knew that it's very useful to make associations when you learn a language, but somebody today said me that don't do it. What do you think? So we discussed some problems of memory. Another case, a good friend of mine who was already working in his profession as an engineer said, you know, my Hebrew is enough for me for real life, but I want to go to United States, and in my job, people around me speak more English than Hebrew. So I decided, I learned Hebrew at the university, I decided to improve my oral English, and I translated from texts from English into Russian, and back from Russian into English, then compared, and I still can't speak. I started to laugh. I said, how could you imagine that after such translation, written translation, you will speak? You didn't speak. And he said, but this is the only way I know how to learn a foreign language. And I was a little bit shocked, because he is a very intelligent person. And this is the only way he knows how to learn languages. So I started to develop counseling for people who learn languages. At some point, I also had an opportunity to go from Ulpan to Ulpan to give workshops for students and gathered some experience. And then when Minister of Education stopped financing my lectures, I wrote a book in Russian. This book in Russian, I will later tell you, this is, I have the only one here. And if somebody would like to translate it into Chinese or other language, I will give this only for promise for translation. Okay, so let's, I want to share with you some knowledge about what is important and how to promote language learning. Okay? So, in language learning, we usually have two subjects: teachers and students. And teachers, the education of teachers is concentrated on how to, what material, how much, and so on. All you see here, oh, it's in Russian. Had to be in English, sorry. Okay. I will translate. Okay. But the student, all the teachers are teaching. They are teaching language, but they very often don't care about this, how the about cognition, whether what they are teaching is absorbed. If people really learn, and you know, usually if it's school language learning, nobody knows after if they study only at school. It's almost impossible to have a good foreign language if you study only at school. You all know it. If you don't add something, if you don't study yourself. So my idea was to develop the student, to develop students' autonomy. You all received some questionnaires on your table, and there is a questionnaire about students' autonomy. Look now, please, and you will see that there are specific symptoms of autonomy. If you are blaming only the teacher that you don't know language, you are not autonomous. Autonomy means that the student takes responsibility, but in order to do it, he has to have very developed metacognition, and to know metacognition individually adjusted, that he knows how he or she has to learn. What is better? And so you have, there are other questionnaires, but we will come to other questionnaires later. So the courses later I developed for teachers, I didn't teach them how to teach. I taught them cognitive psychology in order to understand how students learn language. And the first problem for language learning is the problem of motivation and the problem of challenge. Everybody who starts a new language, these pictures are from this book, okay? So everybody who starts to learn a new language I myself felt a very fear of Hebrew. Okay, and I knew that I have to overcome it because I was a professor of neuropsychology in Russia, and I had a lot of knowledge, and now the only tool I need to continue is another language. So it was a great challenge and a great and as an autonomous student, I will give you a personal example because I'm a very autonomous student. When I came to the Minister of Absorption in Israel, and I knew that they have to give me 5 months, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, intensive language learning, and I was ready to learn very intensively. So I asked for several addresses of Ulpanim. I came to the first one, central, very prestigious, and they said, we are happy to have you. You will be number 38 in the class. I thought to myself, no way. 38 students in the class, you will be not able to speak, and 38 students for language learning, not good. I went to another Ulpan. I had several addresses, and I asked for several addresses in advance because I knew that this is so important. I come to another, a small group, very nice, also very friendly, and they say, welcome. I sit the whole day to see how, and I see that after 4 hours, everybody looks at the time, and they go home, and they said that they have 4 days, 4 hours. 5 months, but 4 days, 4 hours a day. And everybody was happy to leave, and I didn't want it. I went to another Ulpan, and there I found a very good intensive study, 5 days, and a very nice atmosphere. I stayed there, but at some point I was late. They already started a month ago, but somehow I rather quickly was at the same level, and I feel that soon the end will come. So I had only 4 months because they already had 1 month. But I still can't say anything about psychology, about neuropsychology, about my profession. I scarcely can tell a little bit. And then I found that there is a very intensive Ulpan for young people, and they only start soon. So I will finish here, and they didn't want to take me because it's for young people. I insisted, and they took me, and I had 5 months more. At the end of these 5 months, I started to work at the university and continued to study with students, foreign students who have intensive Hebrew continuation of it, okay? So this is an example of autonomous behavior. I knew that I need and I find the best way. And also because I knew my individual learning style, in the last Ulpan I took home the tapes, and I am very auditory, so I listen a lot of tapes after Ulpan, additionally to Ulpan. Then I started, at the university, I started to go to lectures on the topics which are close to me, and then at one course of sociolinguistics of bilingualism, I felt that there are psychological aspects which I know much more than the professor who is teaching. She's teaching sociolinguistic aspects. Then when she speaks about motivation or memory or individual differences, she only mentions and then goes further. And I prepared syllabus for another course. I brought her, and she said, but this is what I'm teaching. I said, please look carefully. You don't concentrate on these topics. And she said, you know what, you are right, and gave me this course, which I was teaching already for many years for teachers of languages, okay? Psychological aspects of language learning and teaching. But also developed an approach for students, not for teachers of languages, but students. So today I will see you both as people who can take the approach and counsel and help other people, and also as students, okay? That's why you have these questionnaires, and we will make some exercises too. Be prepared for exercises too. Okay. So theoretically, the idea was based on Vygotsky's concept of zone of proximal development, which means that we can help people to develop better strategies for language learning. You know what is zone of proximal development, the difference between individual, independent, and with the help. So we can help people to learn languages. And for this, we have to know more about how to learn. Why motivation in language learning is more important than motivation in any other subject. How do you think? Why? You know what? I also don't hear you well. Because you're asking a lot of questions, please sit closer. Okay. So why do we need more motivation for language learning than any other subject, geography or history?
Basic learning in language is just a little process for the learners. I have lots of students in my country which I'm teaching them English. So we have lots of highs and lows in their day. For example, basically when I want to start my classes, 4 or 5 minutes, I'm just talking with them. It's just what happened last night to you. They just started with their own language. They like their native language. When I ask them to think about it, they are just going to do many processes for it. Find the exact thing which they want in their native language, translate it into English.
No, I am asking one question, not all the problems of language learning. Why motivation is more important?
Because, most of the time they are going to forget why they are there in the class. Most of the time they think that this is just because it's composite, maybe, or maybe because it's prestige for them. But when you just remind them that no, this is just necessary for you. If you want to communicate with other people all over the world.
Okay. Did anybody understand what the main, have another, yeah? Okay. So the first idea is that language is used for other knowledges. That yes, for study. Practically, it's when it's a second language. By the way, the difference between foreign and second language, do you know? We will come to it, but I think that one of the most important factors in importance of motivation for language learning, because language is a part of our soul, and learning a new language is like becoming a new person, taking the rules of another culture, taking an approach of other culture, and language and culture are very close. So it's not only cognitive challenge, it's also personal challenge to be another person, to be another, especially when it's about the second language. So some people are opened, and some, if there is a fear, they can close themselves. It's, in professional literature, it's called affective filter. Okay, people can close themselves. So, if you are closed, you will never learn, because for any learning you need to work to motivation. But for language, it's especially because it's really it's difficult, because there are, if it's second language in adults, like me when after immigration, you have a lot of challenges except language, to take care of your family, to adjust to another climate, to another culture, and being unable to communicate. It's very, very challenging. Okay, so here only very strong motivation and sustainable long motivation is very important. And there are, we know two kinds of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. And of course, extrinsic motivation for getting more salary, for getting job, for like that, for getting good marks, it works. but for short time and needs a lot of effort. So we need intrinsic motivation, which is when people enjoy the process, when some positive emotions are related to the process, not only to the results, but to the process of language learning. And then there is a question: the more the better. The more the better. You already saw this, and you know the Yerkes-Dodson law, yes? Not many very strong, very strict laws are in psychology, but Yerkes-Dodson, more than 100 years, is still correct, okay? So it means that not the more the better. Minimal motivation, minimal result. It can be any activity. How many words you remember, how exactly you tap some point, and so on. Motivation can be measured physiologically, and you know it, and results of any activity. So minimal result, minimal. Then the more we are active, the better, but at some point it's too much, it's not good. When we are very motivated, we are not very efficient. What happens now, as neuropsychologists think that the fear, the thinking of why, what my mother will say, I will fail, oi, these thoughts, they steal energy. They steal energy from the main activity, and then mistakes, and then even disaster can come. And this is very important law. One of my students, who is now already a doctor, she once said me that from your course, this is the main thing I remembered, because when I failed the exam, I went out and I said, Bella said don't fear, don't be afraid. And she said that she had to make it once more because at this stress point she just couldn't remember anything which she knew. And after she went out, it's very often, I think you know this situation, that at exam you don't remember, and after behind the door you already regret and remember everything, okay? So the more the better is not good. Then what else we need for, okay. There are some general strategies for language learning. First of all, I told you, and you know, that nobody can learn language perfectly in the class. So you have to open your eyes and ears. If you are in the difference between second and foreign language. It's difference in motivation, because foreign language we learn for all kinds of different motivations, for a job, for going abroad, for having love with somebody who speaks another language, and so and so on. And you learn it usually outside of the culture and milieu of language speakers, foreign language. Second language, the motivation is for life. If you live in another culture, with another language, which is not your mother tongue, and you want to live here, you need the language. So the motivation is for real life, which can include also profession, like in my case, or just everyday life, and inside the culture. So the strategies for second and foreign language are a little bit different. And in foreign language, really the very important is role of the teacher. In second language, even more important is autonomy of the student, because he lives in the culture and he can learn everywhere. And when I teach in Hebrew in Israel, we discuss also the international status of English, which is not exactly foreign and not exactly second, because it's everywhere also in our culture, but not as a main language, not as an official language, but a lot. And we can learn it also for very wide. So it depends on different cultures, different countries. But because here in Russia we now learn and teach in in English, it means that it's really a must for any any student who want to have some more wide international knowledge. Yeah. So when one of the recommendations for everybody is to open eyes and ears. I will give you an example how important but not obvious it is for everybody, and we have to prompt it. Being about a year in Israel, I came to the market, we call it shuk, to market with a friend who was already 5 years in the country. And, we have plastic bags in each stall, and he had to say, please give me he couldn't reach, so ask for help to reach the plastic bag. And he couldn't. And only a year in the country, I said, "Ten li sakit bevakasha." And I said, "Why don't you know this? Why couldn't you say?" He said, "I couldn't study in Ulpan because I was sick." I said, "Yeah, but it was you 5 years. You go to the market. You open your eyes and ears. The language is here." So next day, he proudly said that when he was parking his car, somebody said in Hebrew "tafuspo," which means it is forbidden, occupied. And he came and proudly said, "I know a new word." He opened his ears finally and understood that he can learn without Ulpan, that the language is everywhere. And I remember the first day I was going to Ulpan, the very first day. I remember because I took a bus and then I understand that I can walk. It was very close. But the first day I didn't know. So I took a bus and a woman showed me the place near her and said in Hebrew, "Sit down, please, madam," but in Hebrew, okay? "Shvi geveret bevakasha." And I was so happy that without any Hebrew, I understand what she said. "Sit down, please, here." Okay? So this is an important thing. With foreign language, it's less working, but with second language, or when you learn foreign language and then you go to a country where this language is spoken, open your eyes and ears and learn there also. Okay? So to learn outside the classroom, open, to be ready to absorb language outside the classroom, which is very important. Then, two other recommendations we will see later. Organization of material, and use your strong side to overcome your weak one. For this, you have to know your strong side and weak side. We will come to it a little bit later. But these are very general recommendations. Here, it's how to organize material is more efficient than separate. For example, if you would ask to remember this, yeah? So how, it's possible, but you have to work a little bit. But if you organize it, and if you all studied something about the Gestalt psychology, you understand that well-organized forms are remembered much better. Gestalt says that a good form is more than some of the... So organize. This is visual material, but if we speak about the language, it also can be organized into topics, according to some grammar rule, to organize. Then you remember the idea of organization, and all the rest will come more or less automatically. Then another aspect very important for language learning. What do you see? Some lines, yeah? And now the same lines are organized into something useful, something, okay? This is an example to illustrate how context is important. These are in a context of face, so now it's very easy to recognize each part and also to remember them, and even in this way, which means that some of the information is lacking, okay? Or there are some additional negative factors. So this is an example how context is important. That's why we can read in a foreign language, and if you don't know one word in a sentence, you can guess it by the context. And it's not necessary everywhere every moment to look at in the dictionary. I use dictionary very rarely when it's important. You can guess by the context, but you want some more clear, more exact word, okay? So context is very important, and in language, it's sentence, text, and then bigger texts like book, like a topic of your profession, okay? When I read something on chemistry, I will not understand anything. But if I read something on psychology, I can guess things, okay? So two things about organizing of material. And sentence, text, and also real life context. Real life context using of, I myself, when I learned Hebrew, I couldn't do anything automatically. When I learned a new word, I had to imagine a situation where and how I need to use this word. What sentence, where it can be heard, when I can hear it, when I can speak this specific expression or word or expression. Okay, so context is very important. And what is problematic in school language learning? Lack of context. In school, it's usually very often lack of context. Okay? Once I was teaching a course on, to students of, who will be English teachers. And I had to be present at, at their practice. So once I come and the student comes and says, today our topic is fast food. What do you know about fast food? A word and then all kinds of associations about fast food. And at the end I said, why wouldn't you say, imagine that you are traveling and you are hungry and you don't have a lot of money for restaurant, so fast food would be your solution. You imagine a context, believe me that the words would be more meaningful because why do you need to know it in English? Everybody has McDonald's also in Israel and everywhere. Yeah, but why do you need it in English? Because you will travel, and English is an international language and so on. So context in language learning is very important. Translation. This picture was developed by some artist whom I told the idea. But I developed the idea of a picture to explain why translation is detrimental for language learning. For this guy, I told you at the beginning, who said that he translated from English into Russian, from Russian into English, and can speak. And I developed for him the scheme to show that a code in mother tongue becomes an obstacle to use the second language. If you every time think of in your mother tongue and then translate it into language you are studying, you will never speak. You will speak especially very slow, thinking and using also with code switching and code mixing, using your own language codes or rules for the other language. So, because here you can see the idea that if you want to learn the word bread in another language, say you are a Russian speaker, yeah? You know what is bread. You don't need the concept. You have some experience with different colors, different smell, different tastes of different forms of bread. You have a concept of bread. Now you only need a new word for it, a new code. So you don't, to understand what is this, don't think in your mother tongue. This is I think this is very important and sometimes ignored by teachers' idea. Not long ago, I was related to some experiment in teaching Hebrew with literacy to illiterate Ethiopians. I will not speak about this. There are published papers related to my name, but at some point I received, they were asking me as an expert in language learning and teaching, I received a computer program, a picture, and then the word written and oral in Amharic, and then written and oral in Hebrew. I asked them, if it's a picture, why do you need to use Amharic? They know how to say it in Amharic. And if they don't know how to write it, it's not our aim now to teach them in writing in Amharic. We need them to understand it in Hebrew and to remember how to say and how to read in Hebrew. And the teacher who sent it to me said, I felt something wrong, but I couldn't put a finger on it. And thank you immediately. Really, I was looking for some materials to teach English to my grandchildren, and I found also in Israel a very nice book, and the same picture and word in Hebrew. They don't need Hebrew, they know Hebrew. I want to teach them English, and then there are Hebrew and English, and this is wrong. So I didn't buy this book. I will try to find other ways to give them English, but not through Hebrew, but in real communication. So I hope you got the idea. Why not translation? You come to concepts when you can explain them already through the context, through examples. There are, in each language, there are dictionaries for concepts where there is no translation. I understand you. How to things that you don't show the picture. Okay. Through sentences, through explanations, through examples. Jimmy likes his mother. Jimmy loves his mother. He doesn't like to eat, and so on. Through sentences. Sometimes we need translation. Very specific. I remember that I couldn't, the teacher showed the word about on the here, eyelid and the lashes, yes. And she showed, and I couldn't understand what she shows because it's from there. I wanted translation for it. Okay, very very specific things. But if there would be a picture, I wouldn't need translation because I would see. I couldn't understand what she shows. Okay. Okay, I see an English teacher. Okay, you are close in, but we speak about the student, how we learn, and we don't. We can't avoid translation completely, but at the very beginning stages, when we speak about concrete things and even verbs, concrete actions, we can do it without translation. Okay, how the child learns mother tongue? In the context. In the context. So make as much context as possible for the foreign language. And because you are dealing already with more adult people or even children more mature, so you can create text, context in text, real context and in text. And also today with all the possibilities technological, you can show films, you can show things on the screen, you can show actions in the films, and some people learn through films. I know a person who after the war came to Canada from Hungary. You know how he learned the language? He developed for himself. It was possible to stay in the cinema the whole day. He watched the same film. He was about 15, I think. adolescent, but maybe 16, and he watched the same film the whole day until he understood. Until he understood. Okay, it's not can be recommended for everybody, but you see that you can do it through context. Finally, he understood what they are saying, but he had to say he stayed for the whole day. So context is very important, more important than dictionary. Okay? And memory. Here we come to, I promised you experiment, so now be ready, please. Don't write, pens aside, memory is here. Okay, I will give you 10 words. At the beginning, you only listen, and then when I finish, you have to calculate. You can write then how many words you remember. But please don't say anything, because your word will be a stimulus to all the rest, okay? So listen, remember, and repeat only for yourself. I need only to know how, we will discuss later, okay? Okay, Jordi, will you also participate? 10 words. Try to remember. House, forest, cat, night, needle, cake, brother, bridge, cross, honey. Okay, I see most of you finished. Okay, who remembered only 5 words? Nobody, very well. 6. Somebody had 6. 7. Okay, we'll start. How you remembered? Yeah? You said 7, yes? How you remembered? More? You translated into Portuguese.
Yes, because I know those languages from another context. So I was trying to be
Okay.
impartial.
Okay.
I didn't lose
Okay. Who else want to share how you remembered? Pictures. Repeated. And the last one. Okay. Look, this is very obvious. If I would ask you what words, it will be this way, and you know this is a positional curve, classic of psychology. And I will show you why. Because when you receive the first word, the processing starts. The second another processing, exactly like in physics, okay? And that is interference, okay? And that's why when the primacy effect is when you, primacy effect, because there was nothing before, and now the processing starts. The recency effect, last words, most of you remembered last words, yes? Nothing after that. But also this in the middle usually have disadvantage. So how we can use this knowledge? First of all, we can make more space, more intervals between the first, second, to give more for processing, but not too much. Because if you do too much, then it will be boring, and then attention can go away. So we have to find optimal. The other more important thing is to lessen interference if you vary the ways of presentation. Exactly when you learn, vary the word with the work with the word. You listen, you repeat, you write down, you read it, you develop a sentence, you imagine, you do all different things with the same material. And this is to lessen the interference. When you know a little bit of neuropsychology now, you use different functional systems when you read, or when you listen, or when you write, or when you develop a context, when you develop imagination, then your frontal lobes work more intensively. If you write down, it's visual motor, reading, listening, all kinds of senses, and you involve all kinds of brain functional systems for the same material. Then it will be like in real life. Sometimes you listen, sometimes you speak, sometimes you read, and so on. So this knowledge is very important for students to develop their own strategies for learning. And also we know the well-known recommendation, because of the recency effect, not to study before you go to sleep. Then you give more time for consolidation, and then no interference after you studied. So make some reasonable rest after intensive learning. It's very important. Because if you learn and learn and learn and use the same, reading, then the efficiency of is dropping, okay? So all kinds, variance of ways is very important. Okay, let's go further. And here, from here we can go to individual differences. When I asked you, how did you remember? This is a question about the metacognition. Metacognition, to understand what I am doing in order to remember. Metacognition. And here, if we would continue, we already heard several different strategies, yes? Translation, repetition. I am sure that somebody developed pictures, okay? Somebody developed a story with the picture or without the picture. It's individual differences, and all this is correct, all this is reasonable, and we know that we all have differences in how we approach learning. And here you have also two questionnaires about individual differences. First, look at the most. So, individual differences is not who is better, but how, what way we study. How, what way, which way, the strategies, how they differ from one another. And look at the first questionnaire about the visual and visual auditory. This is the most useful, most simple, and most efficient if you use it. So some people are visualizers, some people are auditory prone. And it is very important to know your own, because we can recommend different strategies how to learn. My approach is that you have used, remember the general principle, you have to use your strong side to overcome your weak side. Not, if you know your strong side, don't capitalize on it. Don't work only this way, because if you do this, your weak side will be even weaker. So, but if you use your strong side to overcome your weak side, this is the most efficient recommendation. How, I will start with, I don't think we have enough time for you to do the whole, but maybe most of you already know it yourself if you are visual or auditory. And this questionnaire is only sometimes for people are discovery and sometimes only to support what they already know. But in my opinion, the very using these questionnaires, thinking of it, it's already developing metacognition, because many people don't think about it. Of course, you who take such courses, I hope that you know, but I thought also for people who, we have in Israel so-called adult education, so people who work already as clerks or officers in education, but themselves they don't, secretaries, they don't have any education, higher education themselves. At the age after 35, they receive some help, and they can learn for themselves, but not being teachers. To work with other adults, okay? So it's a lot of social psychology, but also they had my course online. And very often I received shocking confessions. One I remember very strong. I am 42, and for the first time in my life I understood why I had problems in studies at school and why I was afraid to, for higher education up to now. And thank you very much, and so on. So people sometimes only later, if they are helped, they discover. If not my course, she would never think why she didn't, was not very efficient at school and why she didn't start higher education till the age of 40, okay? So promotion of metacognition is very important, and it's less important which results you achieve, but the process of doing this exercises, doing this test already promotes your metacognition. So if you are auditory, I am auditory, so I can start from this. My recommendation is to start from your strong side, then parallel both. For example, you have to have tapes of recorded text. You have it written. Today it's not a problem. In all languages you can find in internet or in libraries text and recorded it. So auditory people have to start from listening, then listening and looking at the text. How many times it depends on individual abilities and level of age and level of studying the language. It's individual. Maybe several times to listen and then several times parallel and then reading. So this way, and visual have to do it in the other way. Reading and listening. This is very important strategy, I recommend, because this way you use your strong side to overcome your weak side. Other way, if you use only your strong side, or if you don't know and by somebody's recommendation you use your weak side, you can develop the emotional filter, emotional barrier, and stop studying, which happens to some people. And people are very, very different in this. I discovered it back when I was still in 80s. I had a research together with Moscow University. I was working at the Rostov State University, and in Moscow State University they developed intensive courses for teachers who will go abroad to teach in Africa, and they were teaching them French at that point. Very intensive course of French for teachers of Moscow University who will go abroad and study. And at this point, the course was very, very intensive, but only oral. They forbidden to use grammar books, to write, only oral communication. Why? Because they knew that usually people who study in classes in traditional approach, they don't speak. So they started with the speech, very intensive. And then I come and interview people about their experience. And two cases were striking. One case was, one person said, I always thought that I'm stupid. Now I am so happy. I am not stupid. I learn and I enjoy. I'm just happy. With this method of very oral, very communicative approach. Another person said, I can't stand this intensive auditory input. For me, it's impossible. If they forbid to use grammar books, at home I use it. I have a handbook at home, I have a worksheet, I add something, because otherwise I would just leave. So you see, two different people. One is very auditory and very communicative, and other of the same intellect. They were all of the same level of achievements in science. But the other one needed more grammar, more visual, more individualized approach he developed for himself. He was very autonomous. And the last questionnaire you have there, it's about communicative or linguistic approach to language learning. So one of them was very communicative, and the other was very linguistic. By the way, my own research shows that it is related to interhemispheric balance between, we need both hemispheres for language learning. Most students who were most successful, I would say talented in language learning, they had much less asymmetry between hemispheres, which means both hemispheres were working together very efficiently. Those who had a very strong left hemisphere dominance were very prone to linguistic approach. Those who had more right hemispheric, not dominance, but very active influence of the right hemisphere were more communicative. Okay, so from then, it was long ago, I know that we need two hemispheres, two efficient hemispheres for best results in any. Later I found in the literature that for math, for music, for everything, we need both hemispheres. And to say that creativity is related to the right hemisphere, it's not right. We need right hemisphere and we need left hemisphere. If it's one much more active or a second is not efficient, then we have some special problems, which can be also overcome, but not so simple as training the hand. It has to be different strategies, okay? So, in the questionnaire about visual and auditory, you don't have anything about the kinesthetic. You don't have there. Because I think that kinesthetic, the language exists in two forms, written and oral. And kinesthetic is like some addition. I usually say that if you want tap, if you want to go, if you want to eat, go ahead, do it. But if you only that will not, it can help you to sustain attention. It can help you to feel better, more physically more comfortable. It's good. But for language learning, you have to learn language and to know how to do it. And the kinesthetic aspect is very important is more important for children. And I developed this approach more for adults, but also for children, of course. But and this questionnaire is not for preschool children. And even I remember one very strong case when a girl, 14 years old, she said to my colleague when he came with an inspection of how how children study intensive ulpan for adolescents. She said that I am happy my friends don't know what I'm doing here. I would be ashamed. What's the problem? Because in order to learn Hebrew alphabet, the teacher asked them to cut letters. And this was, she felt it like humiliation. Okay? Which means that for kindergarten, this is a proper approach, okay? By the way, in Hebrew, there is a long tradition that when usually Jewish children started to learn reading and writing very early in religious education. So they received letters from baked letters with honey in order to show them that learning letters is very nice, okay, very tasty. This is very traditional approach to give them letters with cookies with honey, okay. But for adults, it would be nice, but not. There are more efficient ways, okay. So that's why questions for you, if people would ask you questions about the kinesthetic or movements or so, no problem. Move, dance, do whatever you want, but the language exists in oral and written form. That's it. So the last questionnaire you have, it's about the okay, there are tips for kinesthetics also, okay. Write, hold the book when you're reading. It's some additional. Listen to tapes while driving, changing postures while studying, walking around the room, acting out with toys and finger taping. Do whatever you want, okay? Whatever pleases you, but together with language learning, together with tapes or together with listening or reading or writing or doing something. You the role playing with the study partner. This is the best, because this includes also the context, real imaginary context, but movements and for me this is the best. And for some some good teachers use short films, and then people act something. This is the best to receive. Also for speaking, the best way I can recommend is to repeat what you hear, to repeat messages what you hear. Why? Not what you read. Later you can read also, but why heard? Why listening? Because you receive correct accent, correct form of pronunciation, and then you try to pronounce it, repeating, but not words, usually sentences, and also short communicative situation on the screen, on computer, on films, and then trying to repeat it, to act, to repeat it. This is also a good way. And also the last difference is communicative or linguistic. The last questionnaire you have, communicative or linguistic. Like yesterday I said that two hemispheres are like two sides of the hand. The same I can say about the language, which is related also to hemispheres. Language is an abstract symbolic system with all the aspects which linguistic studies, yes, but also language is a tool of communication. And these two things are very strongly related, and very strongly related to our interhemispheric cooperation in speech in mother tongue and in the second language. So there are people who like to sit down and learn, through books, through writing and reading. And there are people who catch language as if from the air, from the real communication. Each way has pro and contra. If you study only linguistically, usually people have problem in speech, in oral communication, understanding and speaking. People who study only through communication, usually only if they capitalize on one way and don't want to see the book, then grammaticality, and then reading and writing need a special training too. It's different skill. Okay, so the best way is to know your strong side and to compensate through the weak side. For example, if you are very strongly linguistically prone, don't forget about listening and repeating, even as a study form, listening tape and repeating at least to train the verbal communication. But also don't delay too much starting to communicate. If you are only very strongly communicative, don't forget about handbook, don't forget about writing and reading too. Because those who speak only, learn only from real communication, sometimes they are weak in academic side of the language. If they don't need it, okay, but most of us need also academic side of the language, yeah, for studies, for so. This is more or less. I want only to summarize. So, most important aspects of language learning are motivation, cognitive processes with metacognition. Not only strong memory or visual perception, but metacognition is very important. And this leads, metacognition leads to individual differences. So if we know our differences, our weak and strong sides, and we can use the strong side to improve the weak side, then then the result will be. But also to understand that this is a long process, and it needs a strong motivation. But too strong motivation is also not good. I could give you several examples in my life. I met also in children and adults, and over motivation brings to stop studies. Do we? What about the time? 5 minutes. Okay. Two examples. A girl whom parents said that they take a private teacher because they want her later to become a diplomat. She just couldn't study at all because she was a girl over perfectionist, and she understood that the goal is beyond her. She was only 11, and she was afraid. And who asked me for help? Her English teacher, because she said, "I never had this." At school she's a brilliant child. At school she is very good, but she said, for 3 months we didn't achieve anything. So she asked psychological help. And then I found that she is just afraid. She's just afraid. And then when I discussed it with her parents, they understood that they over-motivated her. And then she was told that forget about the diplomacy, just learn, and she started to learn because she was just afraid. Another case with adult, a woman of my age, because she was from my school, from the from another class. A medical doctor comes to Israel, and another friend of ours, who is very, very famous already neurosurgeon in Israel, said her, "Dear Tanya, only Hebrew. I will help you to get the job. I will help you, but you need Hebrew." And she started to study, and she felt that she said, at night I study 50 words, and in the morning I remember only 5. And also, I'm not sure. She couldn't sleep. She was very, very tense. I tried to help her, but it didn't work too much. She was calmed down only for a short time, and then when I met her, I asked her, "Who told you that in 3 months, that you can learn English?" She said, "What do you mean? I was a brilliant student. When I needed to pass any exam in medical school, I sat down and I learned, and everything was okay." So she sat down and learned Hebrew, and it didn't work because language nobody learns like that. Sit down and learn day and night. And then she started to work too early, and she said that I couldn't differentiate the name of the illness and the name of the patient, and she failed and she couldn't work, and she got another job, but she was not accepted as a medical doctor. Okay, which means that over motivation and the wrong approach, she failed. I told her that you have to take much longer time. I started to work to use professionally my Hebrew after 3.5 years, and she wanted after 3 months already to have serious results. Okay, so all these things to be autonomous, metacognitive, motivated but not over-motivated, using your knowledge, everything is important, and I wish you success if you learn another language. So.
Dear friends, I need 2 minutes of your attention, please. Thank you, Bella Samoilovna. I received some questions related to division in groups. Yes, and I would like to tell some words about it. I want to accentuate that practice classes, workshops, master classes, working groups will be held in little groups and half. A plus B, C plus D, for example. Yes, you see it in your program, and I suppose these little groups correlate with the color of your bracelet, maybe. Your presentation on academic session on Wednesday, on last day, will be also in groups. You see it, okay? What is the academic session? What is academic session? It is a presentation in which you integrate your experience of participation in Luria school. Time of presentation is 10 minutes and 5 minutes for feedback, our feedback. Your report is not academic report only. report or presentation. It is a whole experience, maybe your impressions about our city, about lectures, teachers, about workshops, about culture program, maybe embarrassment situation in Yekaterinburg, and so on. I wish you tremendous impressions and experience. And now we have a lunch. Thank you.